Today I've got a short process video for a scrapbook layout that I've done using Design Space and a Cricut machine, of course. I wanted to give a little tip on how to conserve paper and also how to use background paper that has a white edge when you're using it up against a white background with some sponging. Before we start putting the layout together, I wanted to quickly talk about how I can conserve some paper sometimes when I'm making pages or getting kits together and trying to conserve just a little bit on the paper usage. Because when you press Make It in Design Space, it organises things onto the mat for you, and it's not necessarily very paper friendly when it comes to the usage of the paper. So if you have these, say, all in the same colour, it will just put them all next to each other on the mat instead of rotating them and putting things a bit closer. So as soon as you press Make It, you can manipulate each mat, and here's just a little example of what I've done when I was cutting the backing for the baubles. I've rotated them. There's 3 little dots if you click on an item that's on a mat, and you can swing them around and put them closer together. So this would have gone all the way across the page rather than just this section here. So I quite often manipulate the mats to get as much as I can from one cut and keep as much paper for further use later on. So just a bit of conserving paper and not wasting it. The other thing that I like to do when I'm making a page, and if I've got a border around here, I cut away the inside because nobody's going to see that. And then I can manipulate the mat, like I said before, to cut out the photo mats that I've got. So this area here is a lot of space that gets covered up. So I like to have this piece of paper to be able to use on my page rather than being hidden away. So that's all I wanted to talk about with conserving paper. Now I'm just going to show you a couple of little things that I did to put this page together. We're going to ink the edges because when it's white on white and it's such a gorgeous pattern, the white areas can tend to get lost. So I'm just going to use my ink dauber, and I find just going along the edges of my paper, I don't want it very heavy because this is a very clean, fresh page. I just want to do it lightly. We have the blending tools that are available now, but I find that with the blending tools, they're really great for blending and they're fabulous for inking up the edges of paper. But I tend to get a little bit more ink on than I sometimes need. So that's all I want on that, and I find by doing the motion where I'm bringing it towards myself, I have a little bit more control than if I'm going the other direction. The other thing that I've used for this layout, rather than flamingo that is suggested, you can always look at the zip strip. On the back of the zip strips, it tells you what the featured colours are. So black, clover, evergreen, flamingo, pebble, raspberry and white daisy. But I look at this paper and I see red tones. And I wanted to bring the red tones out. I didn't want to bring out the pink tones. So rather than using flamingo and raspberry, I've used candy apple. And this is the light side of candy apple. I'll bring in that big piece again. And when I put the light side against this pattern paper, it brings out more of a red tone than a pink tone. But instead of using the dark side, which is more an obvious contrast, I'm using the light side for this design, which I feel complements these trees perfectly. So everything that is red on this page is the light side of candy apple. The other piece that I'm going to ink up is the base of this tree. You could cut this out of pebble cardstock, but we have this great wood paper, that new paper packet that is in our annual core catalogue and it is available all year. And this very subtle linen pattern was perfect, I thought, to go for the base of the tree. So that that's not floating quite so much, I'm going to use mink because I don't actually have pebble ink. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. I'm just going to sponge on very lightly around this rectangle. And that's just enough to make it stand out just a little bit more. Oh, look at that, I've just smudged everything. And that's okay because I haven't actually stuck this down yet, so I can just flip that over. We're going to adhere these baubles together. What I have done with all of them is create a little drop shadow. I was originally just going to do it with a stenciled piece like this, the same cut. But when I put them together and then put it over the tree, it still looked just a bit too fussy with the pattern behind it. So I have made solid drop shadows for them. And I just use our dot roller, and putting it on our all-purpose mat works really, really well. And you can just gently go around, make sure that you hold the center of this snowflake bauble because it is very delicate, and run your tape runner over it. And then adhering it, I am just going to offset it just a little bit so that the shadow comes to the bottom and the right, because that's just the preference that I like. And then putting this down, I'm just having a little sliver of the red, the candy apple, showing through on the string. And because we've done a drop shadow, it's not quite perfectly finishing at the top, so I'm just going to snip that bit away for putting on the page. Okay, so let's get sticking this down. Now, something that I'm doing a little bit differently this time, I usually have a lot of measurements for guides on the pages, but I don't have that this time because we're going to start building from the bottom up. So let's get sticking this down. Nobody will know I've done that little ink smudge. I love using the Versamat because the lines are already there. It just helps me eyeball everything perfectly. And that's just coming in at 1/4 of an inch. I think my ink dauber's leaving bits everywhere. And then what I'm going to start with are actually these strips of candy apple. I'm going to put the first one down at around 1/2 an inch up from the bottom, so there'll be 1/4 of an inch gap and 1/4 of an inch gap, and I can just eyeball that and do that. And then the next thing I'm going to put down is actually this little base of the tree, and I'm just going to line that up with the bottom of that red strip. And everything is now going to be built from the base up, so you don't need a ruler for this design because I'm just going to go straight from here. This one I'm going to do from the top edge, and then I can place this one centered in the middle. The next piece I'm going to put on is the tree. It's really the statement piece of this design with the gorgeous little touches of the snowflake baubles. Now I might just bring in my ruler for this because I do want this edge to be totally straight. And then I can build from here my photos. Now this photo mat's a little bit different because Normally you would do a mat for each photo, but I wanted this piece to be the same width as that. So it's a 6-inch width, but I've got it on one piece of paper, and I trim my photos down once they've been printed, and this is another way to conserve paper. So now this will fit perfectly above that 6x4 mat. Whereas if I had done a wider mat, it's a little bit harder to get 2 photos lined up and mat them and have them exactly match here. Now the title is the same as the baubles. It has a little drop shadow, so I'll just adhere that, and then I'm going to speed up the rest of this process. That's the left-hand page done. You can see that this is quite delicate too, and I did tear it just a little bit when I was putting that down, but nobody's going to see that under a page protector. We'll get on to the right page, and I have done most of this because you don't really need to sit there and watch me do it all again. It's the same process. I used the base of the tree to line this bit up, and they're tucked underneath this side, and that's also been inked as well. The pattern paper comes in, so it's 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch in, and I've adhered the photos. This will either be a journaling spot or another photo, or I can put flip flaps on there if I've got more photos. And this little piece here that has Christmas attached to the mat, I felt needed a bit of separation from a pattern paper as well. Sometimes when there's a pattern paper, having separation between finer elements just makes them pop a little bit more, and then they don't get lost. So I'm going to adhere that to the back of this photo mat. And I'm doing this the wrong way around because I should be applying it to here. Put this down on the all-purpose mat because the adhesive won't actually stick to it. So it's only a little bit of the white showing, but it's enough to give separation to the backing. There's the 2-page spread, and what I'm going to do now is go through and add some of the silver loose sequins, and I normally just tip them out on the mat and then scrape them back into the bag when I'm done. And I find the best way to attach these is with micro glue dots. Because all I need to do is peel this back, find the sequin I want to use, put it onto a glue dot, and then attach it where I want it to go. So I'll go through and do all of that, and then I'll be back to show you the finished page. Now that I've added the sequins, I decided that I would add one of the little teeny tiny ones into the center of each of the snowflakes, because it just sort of finishes that Christmas bauble off nicely. I'll put some still photos of the completed pages up at the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed watching this and a couple of little tricks I gave about the sponging on a white background pattern paper. and also how to conserve some paper when you're doing your cutting and manipulating the mats in Design Space. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.